participants to the Highburg Planning Board public hearing of June 6th. Call to order. Ms. Creighton is not here. Mr. Licio.
Here.
Ms. Foley.
Here.
Mr. Olney.
Here.
Ms. Gilbert.
Here.
Ms. Tenney.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Looks like we have a quorum tonight. I'd like to remind all board members, guests, to be asked to be recognized by the chair if you wish to speak. This meeting's being recorded. And at this time, I'd like to open the public hearing on correction to Scribner's errors and cross-referencing, Section 12 Administrative Bylaw Edition, and adding new Section 5 Site Plan Review. These items have been listed in the public hearing notice and advertised in the Cricket on May 19th and May 26th. The Planning Board will be deciding on final language to Sections 12 and 6.5. We will take comments from interim planner Betsy Ware, and Chris only if needed on the articles, have a discussion and comment on the proposed bylaw changes. We will take these up one at a time and open each comments and questions from the public. Also of note, if the town meeting approves Section 12 administrative, we will indefinitely postpone the article on Section 6.5 site plan review, as the administrative section includes site plan review. The dropping of site plan review was inadvertent as it was proposed in Section 12 that was passed over in fall town meeting. So at this time, I'd like to open the session to Betsy Ware for some initial comments. Betsy, are you with us?
I am with you. So it was discovered when the zoning bylaw was being reviewed by me and the town clerk that there were a number of omissions and a number of cross-references that were not quite right. And that happened from November to basically this February. I worked with the town clerk on trying to resolve these issues and consulted with Sarah Creighton and a couple of other board members who were heavily involved with working on the bylaw. And as a result, we have come up with a short list of items that really need to be addressed. Section 6.5, which was site plan review of the original zoning bylaw, was deleted at fall 2022 town meeting in anticipation of the administrative section to go in, which was Section 12. And it turns out the administrative section did not, it was indefinitely postponed. So inadvertently, site plan got kicked out of the bylaw. And site plan review is important to a number of different projects coming the planning board's way. So what a determination was made by the board to add Section 12 to this upcoming town meeting on June 28th. And so we have put some language in. The only change to the language from the spring town meeting warrant. No, it wasn't included in spring town meeting warrant. It was included in the fall town meeting warrant, and then the Board of Selectmen decided not to put it on in the spring due to a disagreement on how associate members were going to be addressed. So what we have done is we have eliminated the references to the associate members, and other than that one change, it's as if it were posted last at November 2022 town meeting. Now, last night at the Board of Selectmen meeting, there was discussion about some language that's on the first page which is in 12.2.1, and that section includes language. It includes a third sentence that says, if the inspector of buildings is requested in writing to enforce these bylaws against any person allegedly in violation of the same, and the inspector of buildings decline to act, he shall notify in writing the party requesting such enforcement of any action or refusal to act, and the reasons therefore within 14 days of receipt of such request. That language was in, I believe it was in the fall town meeting article, and that language actually is right out of Mass General Law. So on section 12, the only significant change, the only change is the issue of the associate member, where we have removed references to it. The second article relates to if Article 12, for whatever reason, does not pass, then the second warrant article would be to reinstitute 6.5, which is site plan review, which was in the 2017 bylaw and in subsequent bylaws until it was deleted in 2022. So, and then the third article relates to Scribner's errors. Now, back in fall of 2021, there were a number of zoning changes that were made, and those zoning changes included renumbering a number of sections of the bylaw. And apparently, nobody really went through and corrected subsequent reference changes in the bylaws. So if you had a section that was changed from, say, 6.2 to section 11, it wasn't changed in other references in the bylaw. So what Sarah Creighton, Jonathan Murray, and I have done is gone through and, to the best of our abilities, have double-checked and rechecked and tried to correct those changes from one reference to another based on the fall 2021 town meeting.
Okay, thank you, Betsy. I think what I'd like to do is first take up the Scribner errors items. And I think we all have that in our packets. Any discussion on those?
So we do have Jonathan Murray here from KP Law, and he was a key player in working on this. So I defer to Jonathan on questions relative to this.
My question, Jonathan, first is, can this be taken as just a one at town meeting, just a one fell swoop kind of thing, or does it have to be spelled out in detail?
You can vote the entire document as one warrant article.
And it's voted as one article?
Yes.
Okay.
The gavel review, we could almost move on.
Hold on, there's a technical issue in the room.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from the board on the Scribner portion? Mary?
I have questions. I don't know how you wanna do it. I have, questions on the ones that, I guess Jonathan Murray put together, and then I have additional ones. I guess if we just start with the 4.2 section, it's changing 6.2 to 6.3. I think that's incorrect. I think it's 6.1. You want to refer it back to the parking table.
I'm happy to take a note and look to confirm.
So again, I don't know if it's the best use of board time to go one by one. So there's that one.
Well, we do need to act on this either tonight or at our next meeting to get this into the warrant.
Okay, so how would you like it to?
I'd like to clear anything up that we have, and possibly, if we're all in agreement, move it forward tonight. That's what I'd like to do.
Okay, so there's that one.
Is that confirmed, Jonathan? Were we gonna confirm these now, or?
I can confirm them. It's just going to take me a moment as I, look back and forth. So if you'd like to say the next one, I can work on this one now.
The next one I have is section 9.2.4.2. Your document has changing the 9.43 to 9.2.4.3, and I say it should be 9.3.3.
Can you say that one more time? I can hear you. I'm sorry.
I would change it to 9.3.3.
Where are you, Mary?
Section 9.
9242.
Section 9.2.4.2.
Okay.
So would it help to expedite this is if Mary gave Jonathan and me her changes and then we reviewed them and considered them at the next meeting, on the 12th? And if we need to have a meeting in between, we will.
I mean, I guess I kind of thought that's what the process was a few weeks ago when we met with town council, that we were going to be moving forward collaboratively with this, and then it went silent, and then this was the first draft I've seen of it. So whatever you think is best.
How many are there?
So there's,
how many?
There's one. There's two more corrections on theirs, and then I probably have maybe 10 more.
10 more.
10 more. So if well, yeah, you decide. Well, because some of them are missing, are sections that are missing. I did mention it at the meeting with town council. We're missing the site plan 6.5, but we're missing some sections in inclusionary zoning that were erroneously removed, I guess. And then cross-reference and those types of things. And then there's still some instances where we're using Board of Selectmen instead of Select Board and items like that.
Are those part of the 10, the name changes? How about the substantive ones that we can, the ones that are actually been cut out, I think that need to be put back in? You said there was a few of those?
Oh, let's see. I would have to. There's two missing sections. There's language that needs to be removed. Some
This is
cross
all under the
references.
Scribner, the cross-referencing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if sections that have been erroneously removed would be considered Scribner's, or language that should be removed is considered Scribner's. I thought Scribner's would be more the cross-reference. I mean, these seem a little more substantial to me, but that's for town council.
That's why they're going to town meeting.
So if, you know, I don't want to take up the board's time if it wants to go on to other things. I mean, certainly if any member wants to send through Betsy any changes they'd like to this article, I'm happy to go through them and either make the changes or let you know my opinion on the proposed changes, and that certainly can be done in the next day or so. But I don't know how the board would like to handle it.
Does any other board member have changes on the Scribners besides Mary? So, all right, why don't you send them on, and then why don't we have Jonathan take a look at them, Jonathan and Betsy, and then get them back, if they're valid, into our packets for a meeting either later this week or Monday.
Could Mary just go over them very quickly, just so we get a sense of what they are, and so they can be noted by town council, just to get this ball going?
Okay, I'll go through them quickly. So back to your document.
So we started at 9, we were at 9.
So now going to section 10, 10.3.1, you're correcting references in here, and all of this language actually needs to be removed. This was the LCD bylaw change that we voted in at a prior town meeting, that it was inadvertently attached to the beginning of the Water Resource Overlay District bylaw. And I've sent at least a half a dozen times that this needs to be taken out. It's still in there. And then, so if that top one is taken out, the 10.3.1, the one below that does not get renumbered to 10.3.1B, it's just 10.3.1.
Okay,
In section 11.1.3.3, this references 12.6, yet we haven't voted in 12.6 yet, so I think we're falling into the same trap we did at prior town meetings. Every warrant or article should stand alone, which shouldn't be dependent on one bylaw being approved and then making an error in that. So I don't think we can reference a bylaw we haven't voted in yet. So going to the ones that, do you want me to go to the other ones I found?
Yes.
I wonder if maybe you should make a motion on each one. And,
Well, I think town council is gonna have to verify them.
but with respect to removing things, might be good to have that as a motion.
And for us to vote on it now.
I'd like to get town council's opinion on the removal.
Okay.
While he's here. Do you have any, Jonathan, do you have any comment on that removal of that overlay, or do you need time on that?
Is this in refer
10.3.1.
3.1? So my charge and mission with this document was not to make any substantive policy changes. It was just to address Scribner's errors. It was just to address cross-referencing mistakes. So I did not draft this document with any policy or substantive change in mind. If that's something that the board wants me to add to this, I'm happy to do it, but that was not my intent when I drafted this.
These changes aren't policy changes, they're just language that's inserted into wrong sections of the bylaw or sections that were somehow taken out. So we're not, what we're talking about right now is not policy change.
Could you work with Betsy on that and see?
so just to be clear, when Jonathan and I first talked about it, Jonathan, I stated that I thought it was inserted in the wrong location. And Jonathan came back with this division of A and B and keeping it in because he didn't want to, he entrusted that the town clerk had inserted it in the right location. So we will re-examine that because my tendency is to agree with Mary, is that I think it was put in the wrong location. So I will revisit that with Jonathan.
Okay, let's move on to the ones that are not, that you found that are not in the.
Okay, and so to be fair, in the first ones are in the introduction. I don't know if we want to go to this level of changing, but in the introduction, we still say Board of Selectmen instead of Select Board.
Okay, Ron, sorry to interrupt you. Actually, from the state, they recognize both equally. You don't have to make a distinction.
Okay, so
But it doesn't hurt to change it.
I just let everybody know so we know if that we're wrong in these places. Number 2, it
I
says,
don't have any problem changing it to select board. I don't think the board does.
number 2, it says not all zoning changes Number 2 says all zoning changes require a 2/3 vote. We know that's no longer true, so we should update that. Number 8 says the special permit lapses within 2 years. We've changed it further in the bylaw to say 3 years. So under section 1, authority and purpose, I had an outstanding question to town council from our prior meeting. He was gonna check on the master plan. We never submitted that to DHCD in our regional agency, nor do we have an economic development supplement. So I'm unclear that we're legitimately referencing this in our zoning bylaws. I'll skip that one for now. Again, section 4 references, section 4. Section 4, our use table, A5, multifamily dwelling with not more than 4 dwelling units, references a footnote 4. It should be 5 in the description, not in the table part. 4.3.2, again, references 12.6 that we don't, it's not a legitimate reference, so that's not accurate. I have a couple that I'll just mention in the sheet.
Do we have to go back and then change these references back once 12 gets in? That's to you, Betsy, or Jonathan. Do we have to go back and change them?
So the point is we should do section 12 first, and then if section 12 is passed, then we can legitimately reference 12.6. If not, then we're clearly going to have to come up with another option or check and determine what 12.6, the existing 12.6 is. Because we do have a section 12 in the bylaw, we're just replacing it.
So that would be another warrant article in abeyance, depending on the vote on 12? Is that what you're saying?
I think so.
Yeah, we would have to.
Okay.
Okay, I'll try to go fast. Notes in the table, at note 3C, it says 6.2, it should be 6.1. Section 5, dimensional regulations, 5.1, it says 6.2.8, it should be 8.4, common driveways. Section 5.3, it says C 6.25, which is incorrect. It's supposed to reference off-street parking setbacks, which we took out, so that it's not referencing anything. 5.4, lot coverage requirements table references 4.3, which is no more. This was supposed to reference, it used to reference general district language that we took out. Section 6.3.1 has language in there. It says refer to criteria, procedures, and conditions in section 12, which we don't have a section criteria, procedure, and conditions in section 12. Section 6.6 was somehow removed. It's the reflecting antenna. I think Betsy had said that she thought it was removed in 2010. I went and checked the books at Town Hall, and it was not removed then, so I think
it was removed in 2021,
2021.
I think so.
So we'll have to find that, but it's not in the appendix, so we'll have to find that.
Yeah, the appendix needs revision,
Yes,
as does the index.
yes. Yeah, I'm not even gonna address the appendix or the index. 6.4.2.4 says resident district D, which it should now say resident district D1 and D2. Same with 6.4.2.5. Section 9.2.4.2 says 9.43, it should be 9.33. In section 6.14.6, we're missing a section. It was provisions applicable to affordable housing units on and off site. This was supposed to just be moved with our renumbering, and somehow it dropped off along with we're missing the market rate unit table.
So I looked through a series of bylaws to particularly address that, and I couldn't find in the bylaws going back to like 2015 what that was referencing.
So I think that's a different table. We currently have, the 614.6 is just a market rate percentage table, which was in our 2018 bylaws. So it just needs to be inserted back in. It just says market rate unit percentage and affordable housing unit percentage.
614.6.
The numbering is off in 9.3.9, 9.3.10.4. It says 11.1.1, it should be 9.3.10.2. So Betsy, you're talking about the schedule of fees. I referenced that in the town books, and it seemed like the article was voted in 2005 and there was no schedule of fees, so I think that could be taken out. And then in section 11, energy regulations, 11.1.3.3 references 6.5. I don't know how we handle that because it's going to be 6.5 or 12.6, so maybe we just leave that for now. I don't know. And we don't have the new zoning map in there yet, and there's still an old District D map, which doesn't do anything anymore, I don't think, so that should probably be either voted out or replaced. And then, yeah, I didn't look at the appendix and index, because that's a big mess.
Well, certainly, could that be somehow copied and sent on to Betsy and Jonathan? Can you work with them on that in the next couple of days? Is that good for you, Betsy? Work with Mary on that?
Yeah, Jonathan and I will see what we can do in the next couple of days so that we can put it out there again for a continued meeting on the 12th. I was under the impression, because we had put the word out that we were looking for all changes, and that was discussed at the last meeting, which Mary missed, but, you know, Jonathan and I are more than willing to try to figure out the rest of these.
All right, let us know what you come out with, and you can take a look at what they come out with in advance of us. Great. Okay, on the, anything else on the Scribners from the board? Anything from the public on the Scribner changes? Is it on the Scribner changes?
Jim Gates, 2 Desmond. Last time with the full board, I commented on the real need to be consistent in the zoning bylaws to make things clearer. As far as I can figure out, seeing as how the zoning bylaws are an amorphous document that I can't find in the internet, I think everywhere else, the person referred to in here as the inspector of buildings is none other than the town's agent, Port Orlando, who is also referred to throughout the document anywhere else as the building inspector. And I think grammatically and subject-wise, this article should be consistent with the general use of building inspector everywhere else but here. I've got some other things on consistency, mostly try to be helpful to make it read a little bit better. Frequently, and going through here, I found the word planning board and or the SPGA. Well, the planning board in those circumstances was also an SPGA, and because we have 2 alternatives in the document, I think everything should be changed over to say planning board, or in certain circumstances, the zoning board, and another SPGA, or another SPGA, just to make it clearly understandable that the planning board or the zoning board is an SPGA in those circumstances. To call the other the would indicate that the planning board is not an SPGA. And that distresses me. There's numerous examples of that throughout. Then, of course, I came across the penalties, and that's not much change from where it used to be. But the next item along is non-criminal disposition. So I think that the first section should be additionally labeled 12.2.2A, criminal disposition, and then change the wording to reflect that they have to be convicted by a court with competent jurisdiction in order for the penalty to be applied through the court's decision.
Okay, we're not talking Article 12 yet, but we're talking Scribner changes. We're just talking Scribner changes right now, not Article 12. We'll be talking about Article 12 next. But it sounds like you're talking about Article 12, correct?
Yes, I am.
So we're not up to that yet.
I thought you finished with all the others.
No.
Sorry? But,
Any other public comment on the Scribner changes of the cross-referencing? All right, I think we have a plan on that. So now I'd like to talk about Article 12, or the proposed Article 12, which we all have in our packets. Any comments from the board on that? I have one on page 3, 12.4.1. The last sentence on the top of the page, the 2 associate members may be appointed by the planning board for staggered 3 years. I thought we were taking that out. Where's Betsy?
Yeah, that,
Yes, that was corrected, that has been removed.
Okay,
I guess
and
it's still on our packet site and it's still on the
go on here.
website, yeah, our packet.
And then,
It was an error on my part, I apologize.
So following that, who appoints them then?
I think we're just crossing the
oh,
whole
we're
paragraph's
not
coming
having
out.
that. We're
Oh,
having no
because I still have
associates.
the whole paragraph, I still have the one that was in my,
Well, that's the only thing that remains from what I read.
so I still have in accordance with GL 48-9, 2 associate members of the
What page
planning
you-
board.
we're on?
Same thing,
Page
two, bottom of page
Bottom
two.
of 2, top of 3. Sorry, Mary.
I thought the whole thing was coming out. That was my, that's
So my version was taken out.
It was taken out?
Not
not mine.
mine.
It's in yours?
So there was a revised one put on because Mary wanted
Oh,
a
yeah.
tracker change document. The tracker change document was from November town meeting. And basically, I took out a paragraph and a couple of sentences that related to the associate member. So all the references to the associate member have been removed from the November 2022 article. It was not considered for Springtown meeting, and so it should be the final document or close to it.
So could we just be clear to anybody that's listening, because in the meeting packet that was posted for our meeting, it's still in there.
Yeah, it's
So-
in, it's, now I see it's in here too. I looked at that sentence, but I didn't look at the page before,
So that should all be,
it should be deleted or.
I have a question, Ron.
Christina.
So, similar to what Mr. Keith was saying, I guess, Mr. Murray, could you help us with enforcement? And so, just so everyone knows, the line that everyone was talking about last night, that was in our old bylaws, and it came from, I mean, that's straight from the books that, it's been on the record for decades. So penalties, I think the problem is we are trying to figure out how that Mr. Orlando can issue a violation and we can collect something from this. I believe our current language is 12.2.3. To me, aren't they both penalties?
Yes,
So,
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Jonathan.
So I'll just preface by saying, I've read through what's this section 12 is proposed, but I haven't, drafted up any comments to it. But just to address your question, I think you're saying, and I'm looking at 12.2.2 and 12.2.3. So there's penalties and non-criminal disposition. Is that what you're referring to?
Correct.
Why is there? So in order to enforce bylaws generally, putting aside zoning enforcement action under Chapter 48, Section 7, where the building inspector issues a zoning enforcement order and there's no compliance, we can bring a complaint in court. Putting that aside for a second, we want to talk about issuing citations. The standard way to issue citations in Chapter 40 is what's called a criminal ticket, if we want to just refer to it that way. The building inspector goes out, notices a violation, issues a criminal ticket. If they don't pay the criminal ticket, the ticket gets forwarded to the district court and a criminal case is commenced. Generally, as a matter of practice, it's not just after one ticket, it's usually after many tickets have been issued. In practice, the issue with this practice is that it's very difficult to collect, and we're commencing a criminal case, which has a different standard of review in the court. It's on a different tracking order, and there's different constitutional issues at play. The alternative, which requires town meeting to adopt through a bylaw, is non-criminal disposition. So functionally, it's still issuing a ticket, but the procedure to collect the fines is different. And so that's why you have two. 12.2.2 is the standard criminal ticket, and 12.2.3 is the required adoption of the non-criminal process to issue and collect tickets. Does
So
that answer
It does.
the question?
So can I follow up, Ron?
Yeah.
So does it make more sense, similar to what Mr. Gates was saying, to just clear this up? Can we say non-criminal and criminal disposition? Is this normal language? To me, it's, if someone's looking at this, it's,
So I think it would be appropriate if you wanted to call it criminal disposition and non-criminal disposition as a matter of function. If the building inspector came to me and asked for assistance on issuing, I don't think the label would affect the process, but I understand your point, and I think it's a very fair suggestion. You certainly could say criminal disposition and non-criminal disposition, that's fine.
and can we increase? I don't know where we actually got the 25, 50, 100, and 200. We had some conversation, but could you clarify, can we change that at this point to a higher number?
Maximum of $300.
So can we just change that right now to $300?
You could issue a ticket. Yeah, you'd have to amend this section, but yes, you could do $300.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Can we amend it now to have voted? We did not have counsel when we were discussing this a few weeks ago. So I think we just kind of left it as it is because we didn't have any advice. But I think our intent was to maybe get it higher. So if we could change this language just to $300 a ticket, that is appropriate at this time?
It would be included, it would need town meeting approval, but yes, you can change it at this time.
Okay. All right. So I guess with that clarification, does anyone have an appetite to increase this?
So I'd like to make a motion. Yeah, I'd like to, you wanna make a motion?
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess I would like to make a motion to change 12.2.3, non-criminal disposition, removing the penalty for these violations of 25 and such, to replace it with $300 for each offense. Did that make sense?
I'll second it, for the purpose of discussion.
So to be clear, we're taking out $300 each offense,
Correct.
no graduated scale. So the motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Laura?
Yeah, why were they different? I'm assuming there was a reason between the two different amounts, penalty and non-criminal disposition, so.
We didn't have the non-criminal.
That's new.
And we had the conversation, and I think someone just copied it from somewhere else. But I've looked at a few, and they go right to the 300.
Can we get the lawyer's take on this?
It's a purely policy decision. Some towns want to give folks the opportunity with smaller fines. Some folks think that if there's a violation of the zoning bylaw, that's appropriate just to go to the 300 number. But by law, it has to be a specific amount, and it can be not more than $300. So those are the guardrails for the town, but it's a policy decision on how you want to structure the fines.
Any further discussion? Laura?
Yeah, I just want to be wary of, if it's a hardship for someone, I just want to be thoughtful about that. I don't per se have an issue with $300, but are there examples of how many of these fines have been levied and whether, you get a chance to
We would need the building inspector, I guess, to weigh in on that, and it's not gonna happen.
So at this point, we don't have that section, so there has been none levied. And because the only section that we have is the criminal disposition, Paul doesn't issue really any because he doesn't want to go to court and collect them. So this is the way for Paul to issue tickets that he could actually collect non-criminally. So what we could do in the rules and regulations that we're writing is put that in there that there would be a warning, and then after X amount of days or something like that. I don't know if it's, I understand what you're saying, like it could be, but I feel Paul is only here, X amount of hours to go and have him go back day after day and start with 25 to 50. I feel like we need some teeth and to be able to use his time. He could also, he can just issue a warning, and then if the warning's not corrected, then he comes back and gives the ticket.
Yes, sorry, I didn't want to get back and forth, but I appreciate the context I think it's appropriate to say that a warning shall be issued and then a fine. And if $300 is what is being sort of, that's obviously the max, and if that is, if there's context for that, then I don't have a problem with it. I think there just needs to be an opportunity for an appeal and perhaps for a warning.
So you're amending the motion to have a warning issued first and then $300?
At the building inspector's discretion.
Could I have an alternate suggestion,
Yeah.
which is to say that the penalties will be established by regulation of the planning board, which shall not exceed $300 per offense? Would that
If I can jump in, and I apologize for interrupting, but it has to be set in the bylaw. You can't, I don't recommend setting it in regulations.
okay?
I agree, and I think just setting it and not coming back to revisit it, we, get really hung up on this. So I just wanted some clarification on why the graduation. So from my point of view, yes, I think I would amend it to say the building inspector may elect to issue a warning. Or perhaps a warning shall be issued by the building inspector, and then it depends on the nature of the default, right? If it's something serious and there's life safety, then no, we don't want a warning to be issued before the fine. But, so we
Maybe
need to give
may.
the building inspector some
The
discretion
building inspector may issue a warrant.
at
His
his
discretion.
or her discretion.
Do you accept that to your motion?
Yes. Can I ask Mr. Murray another question? Do we need to add or keep and each subsequent offense for the $300?
Let me just, sorry, I have a couple different screens up right now. Let's see.
How do we keep the? If the-
Yeah, so the general language and if this is something I can write after the fact, or if you just like to vote on the general idea, is I would recommend keeping each subsequent offense, and it's very common to insert language into this to say each day shall constitute a separate offense. That way, the building inspector can go, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and issue 3 fines instead of just 1. But yes, you should keep each subsequent offense. I would also recommend adding, and I can give this language to Betsy, each day shall constitute a separate offense.
Do I need to amend my motion to include whatever you're going to add?
So
Maybe we should just do it at the next meeting.
why don't we have Mr. Murray write the language, we'll approve it next meeting.
Sounds good.
Can I make another motion?
So we'll,
So she needs to withdraw the.
we'll,
Oh.
I'll withdraw my motion.
this motion withdrawn. Okay, and then, do you wanna make a motion on changing 12.2 to 2 to say criminal penalties, or?
Criminal disposition?
Yeah, did you wanna say that? Did you wanna make a motion to say that? I thought you wanted
I think it's clear.
to. Okay.
Does anyone have
You had
any?
a motion,
That's what I was gonna move, to change penalties in section 12.2 to criminal disposition.
is that a motion?
That is.
Second.
Second,
I second.
any discussion?
Only that maybe perhaps this could be one motion addressing both of these paragraphs. They seem like they're related. And if we're trying to get everything passed at the next meeting and not reviewed again and pushed off to a future meeting, perhaps this could all be one.
Well, I think if we make them, they can start to change them and there won't be so many changes next time, that's all. Right? We'll have a document that's actually 90% correct instead of.
So, so we have a motion and it's been seconded, any further discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay, any other discussion on 12.0 from the board?
I have a question.
Yeah,
Should I go big or small first?
Big.
well,
So my discussion is, we have a current, or my big is, we have a current special permit that bylaw that stands on its own and, you know, clarifies what the special granting authority should do, and we don't grant a special permit unless the applicant does these things. We are creating an administrative section that has a new section, special permit, linking to 6.3, which is performance standards. And in the performance standards, it says the planning board or special granting authority can waive the procedures and requirements for a single family, multifamily, or commercial. So my concern is we're removing all the teeth of a special permit in this new section. And I don't know that that is our intent or should be our intent, and I guess if it is our intent, I would like some discussion on that.
Did you know why that was put in there?
I think you have to have waivers because some special permits will come in for a very small thing. And why would you want to get an economic feasibility study done? Because somebody wants to, I don't know, put an extra driveway in or do something that requires a special permit. Or a daycare center, for example, requires a special permit for a large daycare center. And you don't need to do an economic feasibility study. You don't need to do a lot of the meet a lot of the performance standards that we're setting out here. So it's just an escape valve, that's all.
So I think though that we've created a real problem for ourselves because maybe we went too far on the performance standards to say we want to be able to make a waiver, and that's wide open to whoever the planning board or special granting authority is. And I think for an applicant or for a resident, that's a very scary concept that we're saying we're laying out all of this criteria, but a group of 7 can waive any of it at any time for any reason. They could waive it for a big development, a small development. I think we're putting ourselves in a bad spot.
Laura?
I respectfully disagree that we went too far on the performance requirements. I think we did that so that we would get better projects with some flexibility to design them in a way that leads to a better outcome. And if we're worried about that language, I personally am not, but if it would, we could modify the sentence to say something like the planning board at its discretion may waive certain requirements that it deems are not relevant to the scope of the project, or something like that clarifies it. I think there being a 7-member planning board, all 7 members would have to, decide that we're gonna just not care about site plan review. I mean, I think we're all here to do that.
Well, we don't say a unanimous vote either, so.
Well, we don't, but just to finish my thought, I think, I don't think that's the intent. I don't think there's a risk, but if it would give, if it would strengthen the sentence, then I would suggest we say something like, the planning board at its discretion may waive certain requirements that it deems are not relevant to the scope of the project.
But this is in section 6.5, you're talking about 6.5, not 12.
Well, it will be in 12.
No, I'm talking
No, there
about,
won't be.
No, it won't be?
we're talking about section 12, right?
Yeah, but you're talking about the waivers that's in 6.5,
6.3,
6.3.
because the new special permit and site plan in this new section 12 references 6.3.
Are you suggesting we change 6.3?
I'm suggesting we have to figure out something that we either take out referencing 6.3 in the special permit and site plan, or we highly reword the waiver capability, because we are saying, again, for a special permit, we could, because currently all we're saying is a majority of the planning board can waive any and all requirements laid out. That's scary.
I think you're outside the scope of what we can do at this town meeting.
In what sense? I mean, I would recommend not voting in section 12 if we're gonna say we're linking special permit and site plan to a bylaw that's voted in that allows us to waive
So we've already approved, the town meeting has already approved the waiver provision in 6.3.
Yeah, because that's not linked to special permit. We have a 6.3, which is performance requirements that we should review. But then we have a separate special permit that does not link to the 6.3. It's that linking that is saying any special permit can now be waived.
I don't understand.
Well, perhaps town council can weigh in, but if we're referencing in our special permit proposed bylaw that one of the requirements, or not one of the requirements, how to see how it's worded, that standards set forth in section 6.3, and in 6.3 it gives the planning board or special granting authority the right to waive any procedures and requirements. Does that mean that they can waive any procedures and requirements within a special permit?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Murray.
So I'm just looking at the bylaw that's on the town's website. 6.3 is entitled Performance Standards for Special Permits and Site Plan Review. And then it says 6.3.2, the last sentence of that section says the planning board or SPGA may waive any of these procedures or requirements for single family residents or for multifamily properties of 6 units or less. So if this is the section that you're referencing, I think the waivers, the board or the special permit granting authority would only have the authority to waive if it was a single family resident or multifamily properties, not necessarily all special permits.
But if you go to 6.3.13, it says the planning board or special granting authority can waive for all non-residential or multifamily development. So it's in 2 different sections in the performance. So if you add those 2, it runs the gamut from single family to commercial.
The waiver for non-residential or multifamily developments requires the board to make a finding that the waiver is not inconsistent with public health and safety and does not derogate from the purposes of this section because the proposed development will adequately serve the goals and objectives set forth in 6.3.1. So I think it's 2 different standards. If it's a single family or a multifamily of 6 or less, the board has the authority to waive. If they want to grant any other waivers, they have to make those 2 findings. So I defer to the board on what it wants to propose as a policy measure, but that's as it pertains to non-residential and multifamily developments, the board has to make additional findings.
And what are those findings?
In 6.3.13, it says where such waiver is not inconsistent with public health and safety, which is the first, and the second is where such waiver does not derogate from the purposes of this section because the proposed development will adequately serve the goals and objectives set forth in section 6.3.1.
Sounds
So
like we're covered.
I would just respond, in that sense, I think it becomes a subjective, broad. I'm telling you, to me, I think this is not good for what we're trying to do with the performance standards, and I think Laura spent a lot of time on those to, look at all topography and traffic and everything like that, to put some teeth into things. And then we had our free standalone special permit that also had teeth to it. And now if we're saying special permit gets weakened by linking back to 6.3 where things can be waived, I think we've defeated our purpose.
What are we afraid of here that's going to happen? What's going to happen if we waive this to a single family or a multi-family? What's the downside?
Well, the downside is that in our current special permit, we talk heavily about the neighborhood, and we say that the no special permit shall be granted unless the special permit granting authority determines that the proposed use will not be detrimental to the surrounding neighborhood in light of each of the following. And we touch upon some of these in the 6.3, but it's clear with the adequacy of site for size, suitability of site, traffic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's no waiving capability. We're now saying we could waive all of these things because we wanted a development to go through.
Can I say something?
I don't think,
Mary, I think you've got it backwards. The
Okay.
performance standards are linked to 12, but 12 isn't linked to the performance
The
standards.
handles and everything.
Right in 12.5.2,
That's 8
it says, is the first criteria is standards set forth in 6.3.
Yeah, so we've already approved the standards with the waiver provisions. So all we're doing is referring, 12 says, go to section something,
6.3,
or we've already approved it.
right, but
If you want to change,
6.3 currently is a standalone, it's not linking to a special permit.
well, that was the intent, was it not? It
It's
says it says site plan review right on the.
It's the intent, but it's not what we
So
currently
I
have.
think what you're suggesting is you want to change section 6, which you have the right to propose to do.
Yeah, well, whichever one makes sense, we either change 6 or we change 12.
Well, if you dislink 12 from 6, then the performance standards never apply. So why would you want to do that?
Then we have to get rid of the broad sweep of waiving
I
capabilities.
don't think we do. I think that's there for a reason. But you can propose it and we can vote on it.
Well, we know how the voting block will go on that one, so I can propose it. I
Okay.
think it's fair, and this is why I was asking for the track change document from what we currently have to what's being proposed, is so residents can understand these things and make decisions for themselves. And we haven't done that.
I think it's pretty clear what the intent is. And you're suggesting that by putting a waiver provision in, you do away with all our standards. And that's not the case.
Well, I think we give a board a capability to do that. Well, and I don't think, I know, because the language is in here, so I think, we can disagree on it. I just want people to know and understand, and that's why I hope when we decide what our communication to the public is going to be on these sections, that we do show what we've changed, what we've added, what we've deleted. And I think this is an important one.
Laura,
I have to disagree with the concern that we're gonna be waiving requirements. The planning board has discretion in many instances, and we use it as our, with our professional judgment. We will waive standards when they don't apply to a project, but, the proof that we have to do to meet public health and welfare, which is typically the kinds of, among the things that we're looking at with vehicular safety and pedestrian safety and so forth. And then the second clause that has to be consistent with the intent. Those cover us, and I think there is no, to me, it just doesn't seem like this is a wordsmithing that is going to result in a substantive improvement of our process, because I think we do have jurisdiction as a planning board and a member of professional representatives of the town, and we will use our jurisdiction to say when something does or doesn't apply to a project that we're looking at. And if it doesn't apply, we will waive it, or we can choose to discuss to waive it. But I don't think there's any implied or written context here that says we have just, given this kind of overarching broad waiver, because the way it's written doesn't allow that. Public safety and welfare are looked at, and the intent of the law is considered. And so if we come to a vote on this, I would say we should move on to the things that are in section 12 that are that get us towards moving to a document that we can pass. I just don't see this as being a concern.
I disagree. I think it's a big concern.
would you like to make a motion?
I'll go through the motion of it, sure. I make a motion that we amend section 6.3.3 of our zoning bylaws to remove section 6.3.13 waiver of standards and to amend section 6.3.2 to.
Maybe we should, I don't mean to, but we should probably do them one at a time.
Sure. Just the 6.3.13.
Get a second on that motion.
What did you say though? I don't think you said any words.
I said that we delete section 6.3.13.
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
I just want a
I don't think we
procedural,
really have the ability.
Excuse me?
just a procedural issue. The board didn't give notice that it was going to amend
Yeah.
section 6. So I
On
would
the agenda.
hesitate for the board, recommend the board start amending sections that weren't in the this public meeting notice.
Good catch.
Understood. Anything else on section 12 from the board?
I have a question. Mr. Murray's
Public will speak after the board speaks. So
advice.
Thank you for acknowledging that.
So with the criteria, the special permit and site plan criteria, and with the waiver, there has been discussion. Where do we stand with that waiver? To me, just to follow up on Mary's train of thought, if we were going to deny something, what would that denial of the special permit be if we, with that waiver clause? I feel like that even, I mean, we've talked about we can just deny a special permit because we don't like it. We can deny it, we can just say whatever reason we want. So I guess with this criteria and the waivers, is that a true statement?
Well, so I don't want to give you, I certainly answer the question. I don't want to give you a blanket yes or no, because I think the board has to keep in mind that every application is different, as you know. Every property is different, and then what the specific proposal as it pertains to the bylaw is different. So just keeping that in mind, I don't think it would be appropriate to give a blanket statement. But with that said, there is a waiver provision in this bylaw. It appears the board is under no obligation to issue waivers. The board certainly can require that any proposal that comes before it in the context of a special permit, it complies with the bylaw. So if the board is not inclined to grant a waiver for some particular project, that's completely, it's depending on the specifics, it's generally appropriate.
So denying a special permit, does it have to be some kind of rational reason?
The standard is the board's decision can't be arbitrary or capricious. That's the legal standard. The standard in what needs to be in a decision for a grant or denial is different. Grant is a little more substantive than a denial, but just as a general matter, I wouldn't recommend the board simply deny something outright. You need to give reasons for the denial, and they have to be consistent with the bylaw and the application before the board. But yeah, if the proposal doesn't meet the standards of the bylaw, and it's a use allowed by special permit, then the board can deny. But again, this is really fact specific. But boards can deny special permits. That's very appropriate.
So the fact that we have a waiver in there doesn't loosen the ability to deny it?
The board is under no obligation to grant a waiver.
Okay.
No.
So in section 12.3.3 powers, under the ZBA, I think this language is new. The zoning board of appeals shall not have the power to grant use variances. So who does? No one?
No one.
Okay. So just for examples, Tappan Street is a single family residence. Right now it's a commercial property. There was a proposal for a development to turn into multifamily. So at this point, no one can change the use from commercial. If it's changed to anything, it has to go to single family? Is that what this is saying?
I I don't know the specifics of that project, but so just for the board's knowledge, and if I apologize if I'm saying stuff you already know, but there's generally two types of variances, two categories. There's dimensional variances and use variances. The Zoning Board of Appeals has authority under Chapter 48 to grant dimensional variances, but the law says that in order to grant use variances, it needs to be explicitly provided for or explicitly authorized in the zoning bylaw. So what this version of the bylaw is saying is that the zoning board may not grant a use variance, meaning that whatever district a lot is in, it has to conform to the use regulations. You can't put, the zoning board of appeal can't authorize a industrial factory in the residential zone by use variance, or whatever other uses, are generally granted. But what this is saying is the zoning board can't grant use variances. That doesn't affect dimensional variances, though.
Okay. So if it's not on the use table, the ZBA can't allow it, is that?
The ZBA can't grant a variance to authorize a use that's not allowed in the district.
Okay.
Any other comments from the board on 12? Comments from the public on? Yeah.
So on one of these, I had mentioned it before, and it just never gets changed, and I'm doing something wrong here, but 12.6.4.1. We say locus map at a scale not greater than 1 foot equals 2,000 feet. In our current bylaw, we have 1 inch equals 2,000.
That's a typo, it should be 1 inch.
Yes, okay. So I've given that before and it's just never been
Yeah,
changed.
I gave it to Betsy too, so.
So I shouldn't feel bad.
No, you shouldn't feel bad.
Scrivener.
Add it to the list. Is it so this gentleman had raised this issue and I felt it as well. We've started to, it was inserted, the SB.
Mary, sorry, could you just mention the section number that
Oh.
you're referring to?
12.6.6. It's in a few places, but that's one of them. It says the SPGA or the planning board. I think we have to just say the SPGA. I mean, I think in most cases it's the planning board, but I don't know why we're saying the special granting authority or the planning board.
No,
We
that
would
makes
be the
sense.
special,
Yeah, I agree with
so I would,
that. Does the board agree with that change?
The BSPGA.
yeah, and just strike for the planning board. Okay, and there's a few of those instances, so I'll just make note of
Whenever
that.
that occurs, why don't we just say the SPGA?
Yeah,
Can we make that as a blanket statement?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair? May I just point out that, you guys know the intent better than I do, but because this is under site plan approval, because it spells out SPGA or the planning board, it might be referring to the fact that, site plan approval isn't a special permit. So it's just clarifying that whether the SPGA is issuing a special permit or the planning board is considering site plan approval, it's just specifying the two different zoning reliefs.
Makes sense.
Keep it back in.
Yes.
Yeah, put it back in.
okay, yeah,
Keep it back in.
okay.
Strike that, Gail.
Sorry about that.
Thank you, John.
12.8.1 and .2, it references section 4, I think it needs to reference section 6. This is talking about parking regulations. And our parking table is 6.1.
Okay. Verify that.
What's that? Yeah. And, I'm just checking. So I didn't know why we are removing section, from our current 12.9 planning board fees and expenses. Because that's covering the 53G that we keep mentioning, and now we're removing it, and I don't know why.
Betsy, you have a comment on that? 12.9, I don't see it.
So it's in our current bylaw, but it's not in this proposed.
Why was 12.9 removed?
Correct.
Correct.
I don't know the answer because this was done for fall 2022 town meeting. I'm assuming it was vetted by the board and Sarah and Mark Bobrowski.
What's 12.9?
No. It's the planning board fees and expenses, so it talks about 53G, consulting fees, filing fees.
Well, fees should be in a totally different document.
Well, it's not a fee table, it's just referencing that the planning board can determine filing fees. And then it references hiring consultants through Mass GL 44, Section 53G. I mean, all the stuff we've been saying we need. We have it.
Right.
We put that back in as the board have an.
But I believe that, as I understand it, Mr. Bobrowski felt that it should be in the rules and regs. I wasn't around for that, but generally it's not in the zoning bylaw, it's in a different document.
Well, so it was just voted in 2007.
Actually, 12.5.8 talks about fees.
In the proposed.
12.58.
Yep, 12.5.
Right, yeah.
So it would move.
So do you think that that covers what we currently have
I think
to?
so, yeah.
Okay. That's fine.
Copies here. And the public too, if they want any copies.
So I don't know where to refer it in the proposed, but we have in our current section, 7.5.4, we have a section that is the failure to act. So if a special granting authority does not act within 90 days, the special permit is automatically granted. I just need to verify that it's in this new version. I didn't see it.
Well, 12.8.6 specifies the decision. And it's within 90 days of close of public hearing for a special permit. Failure to file the decision within 90 days after the close of the public hearing constitutes approval.
Okay. No, that's good. It used to be a
I
different.
mean, Mass General Law is pretty clear on this. If you, Mass General Law is pretty clear on the timeframes.
No, that's good. It just used to be a separate section, so I didn't see it buried in there. I think that's it.
I have one. On page 5, site plan review. That paragraph, the second to the last paragraph, I don't understand how that fits with the paragraph above it. And
Which section?
12.6.2.
2.
So 12.6.2 or 12.6.21?
I guess it's 1.
Okay.
It just stops after premises. I know I'm generally new, but I was just trying to figure out how that fit and what the intent was of the sentence.
I think that's that's kind of taken from our current.
I think I can answer it.
Yeah, that's in there.
So, what it's saying is that if you have a proposal that's going to require 5 or more parking spaces, then you have to go through site plan review, even if on the existing site there are only 2 parking spaces. So you don't judge it, the criteria isn't how many you have on the site,
Got it,
it's how many are gonna be needed.
okay. So we just need to take out the and that's already in the red.
Yeah, it's been
Got it,
crossed-
yeah,
crossed out
got it,
online.
okay.
Okay, any more questions from the board? Otherwise, I'll listen to the public. Anybody from the public want to speak on section 12? Could you state your name, sir, and
John Jay, C Street. I have a question. Ms. Foley was having a dialogue there, and excuse me, but I have the luxury of ignorance, so I don't necessarily know all the 1.435, et cetera, et cetera.
we can do it?
And is there any way that you guys can dumb it down so that we can understand the before and the after? You used some phrase about you'd ask for some kind of information. What was the phrase you used?
Well, I was asking for a track change, so
Track
kind of what
change,
was,
that's the word.
Yeah.
That to find, so that we could see, this is what it was, and this is what you're proposing. Is that possible?
Well, there's been several.
I can answer that, actually, it depends which version, which bylaw you're wanting to compare. If you want to compare the existing bylaw, the track change would be deleting the existing section and replacing it with a new section.
Well, to show the existing section and the new section.
We can certainly do that, it's 6 pages long, each one, probably, something like that.
It would enable the average citizen just to evaluate. I mean, at the moment, I'm, 1 point, blah, 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 and parking and this and that. The summation of what your various changes are proposed to do. It's X and it's Y. Is that possible?
It's possible. I think some of the numbering is different, where it comes from originally.
It's not the numbering per se, it's the concept of what we're talking about here. That's just, we've had the generic element of by right, and does X new proposal established by right or not, that kind of thing.
These are more administrative type changes, but we can try to do something like that. I don't know who would put that together.
Well, but what you're referring to here are, quote, administrative changes, but when you get into something like establishing by right through administrative, that's a bigger picture.
There is no change in by right in this section. Nothing is allowed by this section that isn't currently allowed by the current bylaw.
So, in a different way, what I'm asking is, are your proposals that you're making eliminating the right of appeal of abutters?
No.
well, I think 40A has changed that. I think the state law has changed that, where I think you have to put a big fee
Yeah,
on.
but we're not changing it with section 12.
We're not changing it, but the state has in 40A.
That's a whole other chapter, but for what you're applying here, because I live near Tappan Street and what was being referenced was a dramatic change in the application of the zoning that was there. Would that dramatic change be able to happen with these new proposals that you're putting forward?
Actually, quite the opposite. Currently, it's a little muddy. Now it says very clearly that the zoning board cannot change use. Current bylaw is a little bit muddier about it. So this strengthens the prohibition of changes of use.
Because that's a very important point that all of us would like to know.
Yeah, thank you. for that clarification.
Didn't we have
Yeah.
a track change for, don't we have a section 12? I was just looking in our folder from the fall. Shouldn't we have had,
That's what this
We
is.
should have a track change from, what we currently have, what was the proposal for,
But
and
it's,
I can't find it.
I don't think we ever did it because it's a whole, they're completely different. The wording is completely different. The sections are numbered differently. So you'd see, all you do if you try to change it would be deletion of this, of existing section 12.
But that's, I agree, and I think that, but that's why we really do need to say, but this is what
What we could do
substantively
is
changed.
what we could do is go through the summary of each section and
Yes.
say, summary, this is what the existing section 1 says, this is what.
That would be wonderful. It would be very, very helpful.
Thank you. Sarah Pierce, online, you have your hand up.
Yes, hi, thank you. Sarah Pierce, 9 Front Street. I do agree with the fact that it is hard for the general public to follow all the sections and subsections. I was just wondering if there would be a way to put like an addendum in the minutes, that a brief description of what sections were changed, their original point, and what it was changed to. Like the basic meaning of section 6.2.1 was either deleted because it was repetitive, or it was changed to A and now means this in simple terms.
Exactly.
well, I think in the minutes, it's not gonna help the public for the next meeting, but it probably should get posted to the website before the
Just
next
something
meeting.
that people could refer to. And then I just also wanted to make a comment that I think with everything that this town, the small coastal town, is coming up against with the MBTA, whether our bylaws or planning board regulations will be honored by the state or whatever is decided, we should be as specific as possible in setting parameters around what your board will allow and exactly what that comes down to. So it's just another comment. And just one more thing about the building inspector. I think last night they made it really clear in the select board meeting that the building inspector is really only available about 8 hours a week. So there's, I think, a gap between what his ability to do in his own job and what's reality for the town. So just wanted to mention that back to the building inspector, and that was my comment and question. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Any other comments? Otherwise, I'd like to move on to the site plan
Can I
review.
just make a comment about posting of these things? We used to post things to a zoning recodification page, which is no longer. But we're not, this was posted in a meeting
Packet.
packet, but I don't know that everybody knows where to get a meeting packet. So there was
Yeah.
nothing, like, if you go to the zoning recodification page, we have, public hearing from April or whenever we did it, so there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go.
So I think, yes, if Betsy can work with Tiffany on that and get that corrected and get that into a section for on the planning board. First, our job is to get the language done. That's our immediate task. We need to get done by Monday so we can get it out, and then we can get the public to see the final language, which,
But this is a public hearing, right? The public should have the document so they can make comments
the
on it.
documents were in the meeting these documents were in the meeting packet. Obviously, some people
But
have.
before we used to say you can get them at the town clerk, the library, or posted online here. We didn't do that this time, and I don't think most of the public knows to get a meeting packet. That's kind of fairly new, like within the last couple months. So it's not easy for the public to get these. And we did say to the public we were going to try and make this easier for them. So, I sent you an email about this, so it's nothing new, but.
Laura?
At some point in the communications, we had a link on the town website to the existing
Right.
zoning section and the proposed zoning section. And so I don't know if that's still up there, but that seemed to be a
Yeah, Sarah was in.
easy way for people to read both the existing section and the proposed section.
Maybe add a link of just zoning bylaw changes being discussed or proposed. Just leave it there because we know we're going to be doing this for a while and then people would get used to going to that section.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll talk to Betsy on that.
So I found, and it's
Fine.
zoning impact table 725. There is a section 12 in there, which could be at least a starting point to put out there.
So, 6.5 is, I think what you sent us, Betsy, is the 2017 version on site plan approval.
That's correct.
And I noticed 6.5.4, we've been adding landscape or professional engineer registered in the Commonwealth, and that language is missing.
What I did was I just copied the 2017 bylaw that was existing before it was deleted in 2022.
So is this being proposed to be put back in lieu of, if 12 does not pass?
So if 12 does not pass, this would be what was existing in the bylaw. I did not make any changes to it.
So does the board want to have any changes made or discussion on this?
Well, there's some bad cross references.
I think we need to update this document if it does go back in, Laura.
I think the point of this was that we were simply reverting to the previous language so that there's something in there that we have a basis to review site plan, so that we're not trying to make this the perfect animal, but we're just simply having a backstop so that if 12.5 doesn't get
That's
reviewed, right? So
correct.
I don't think it's a good use of our time to try to edit this one.
Okay, is that the current feeling of the board?
Well, I think at least a cross reference.
I would agree with that, but yeah, if we've, since 2022, changed things, and we have cross-references that lead to nowhere, I don't think that's beneficial.
But this was deleted, so this has no, is that correct? So I'm not sure why we're changing something that doesn't exist.
Well, we're proposing this as a potential bylaw if 12 doesn't go through.
Well, maybe we should wait until 12 doesn't go through.
But we
On
would
the
need
floor?
that.
No, we've already talked about having two ready to
We
go.
need this for cell signaling,
Yeah.
correct? If I'm wrong.
Yeah, so if 12 doesn't
I mean,
go
this
through,
isn't
we're
a
gonna
big
have
deal,
no
I'm
special
just-
permit.
What are the,
Dating, there's
do you have a
two-
couple of, are there?
Yeah, so in 6.5.2, it references section 6.9, which we deleted, so I would just get rid of that. And in section 6.5.6, it references 6.2, but our parking table is 6.1. So if we're gonna put this on the warrant, we should at least have it be
I agree.
somewhat accurate.
Anybody have objection to making those two changes and the one registered or professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts language? Just to make those changes so it goes back in on town floor with that language and those corrections.
Mr. Gates maybe added surveyor, which maybe should add. Is that one of the comments that you had? To add surveyor to that list?
Land subject to site plan review shall be paid by a registered architect, landscape architect, surveyor, or professional engineer licensed in the Commonwealth. Laura?
Yeah, I think we're getting into editing territory here. I would leave it alone. A surveyor prepares an existing conditions plan, not a proposed plan. So, I know I was one of the ones to suggest, we change to registered, but I would say this is just existing language. I agree with changing the cross references, so they're correct. Otherwise, I would propose that we leave it alone.
Okay. I think the board's in agreement with that. Any comment from the public on that?
I was pleased to hear the lawyer talking about the building inspector, my final remark. Further on titles, 12.6.4, you've got site plan requirements should be prepared and stamped by a registered architect, a landscape architect, or a professional engineer. I think you really mean just a civil engineer, because professional engineers may not be civil and not know all that about surveys. And then further on in another section, I misquoted myself, but in 12.8.5 site plan, prepared and stamped by a registered professional civil engineer or professional land surveyor licensed in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I think you just said strike out the word professional in there, and I don't know whether a landscape architect could do a site plan or not, but maybe they should be added to that list. And what was the other one? I'm confused myself. Registered civil engineer. I lost my other page. Back to my list. I emailed a copy to Gail, to the chair, and to Mrs. Felicio of this set of remarks. And I brought two more with me that, in case the emails had not been received, and maybe pass one. Children over here.
Thank you very much. Oops. Yep, I've got it. Thank you.
No, thank you. Oops.
Anyway, some of my other comments are also about the consistency concept that I think has been an improvement on what you've got now, which is a vast improvement over what you previously had brought to the fore. Skipping over the criminal disposition, where we have the word construction, I think that it would be more enlightening to use the phrase of construction and or site alteration, because that's what any of these SPGAs would be involved in. And some of them could be mixed. One would be construction, one would be alterations, but why not put it in consistently throughout the document? And there's one phrase in here that included the word in 12.6.7 in item 3, the word production suddenly pops up. And again, I think that should be construction and or site alteration. It might be expanded to explicitly include demolition, which I didn't find anywhere in here. But in this case, some of these site alterations may involve demolition, which is not covered in section 12. And I've also commented about planning boards or another SPGA or zoning board or another SPGA, etc. And I briefly skimmed through the Mass General laws, and I see that they are consistently using the word provide. And although I was looking for a specific use in the statute of terms of the word conditions or terms and conditions, which appears in the Scrivener's notes in section 8.3b, sorry, 8.3.6. My eyesight's not too good, I'm getting tired. And a lot of this, as I say, goes back to my ideal of consistent use. And I don't really know which everybody is, whether I've got one suggestion here or lineup. Bylaw with hyphens in capital, bylaw joined, no capital, all capital, bylaw with a lower L, bylaws with a hyphen, etc. But I think that whatever it is should be the same throughout the zoning bylaw. And I keep coming across different versions of it. So I hope these comments are helpful. I've had a lot of experience in contracts in my 60 years of business, and mostly trying to interpret them and looking ways to weasel out of things or slam some other party with our own choice of interpretation of the words that are used. So again, it doesn't help to try to use a different word every time something pops up. And the word production is one of those. And I think that's the end of my comments for this evening, other than to repeat that other gentleman's complaint about not having anything as a basis to start to see what all these changes that you want to make involve.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you.
Can we talk about that production? So 12.673. I do think he's right. I think it should be construction byproducts, right? Or do you think it is production byproducts?
I think it's production, excuse me, I just found another one. Mr. Chair, if I may, 12.4.1, subsection, second paragraph, specifically appears to me to conflict with the general law that's referred in there, which specifically states that when you are replacing somebody who's died, resigned, or been kicked out, that you have a posting and a joint board meeting with a select board and appoint a replacement until the next election, at which point the general public votes in town meeting for a person to continue to the end of that place term. And you don't appoint or elect yourselves a replacement. It's done in coordination with the selectmen and only for until the next election.
We have it in our rules and regs draft, but not here. Where, what section was it? 12.4.1.
Second paragraph.
Oh, to add some language.
Yeah.
Okay, Laura?
Just responding to that one, I think that is covered in the rules and regs document, so it would be, maybe Betsy could check that for us, so we're not duplicating language.
Okay, any other comments? Otherwise, I would like to move to continue the public hearing.
Do we think that is production or construction?
You said vote to amend.
Excuse me, did you have are you looking?
So I started the question before you did.
Could you
The-
address what it is?
Mr. Gates chimed in, but I had asked you a question. I said, can we have a discussion about the production versus construction? We didn't get to it, that's all.
Okay, could you?
I was just curious on people's opinion. Do they think it's construction or production?
Which is section?
Six, section.
7.3.
Sorry, which one?
12.6.7. Line 3. Adequacy of facilities of handling and disposal of refuse and other production byproducts. I don't think, we're not talking about production. I think it should be construction byproducts.
Which one?
12.6.7, number 3.
I would say I would change it to construction. I think that makes sense.
I would
May I?
agree with that.
Laura?
I don't think that is construction. I think that's talking about the permanent facility on the site and how it manages its disposal of refuse and other production byproducts of whatever it is producing. This is not a temporary construction measure. This is what the thing is, what it produces and how it's handled its waste. So I would say we should not make that change to construction. I don't think that is the intent.
Any other comments on that? Okay, we'll leave it as is. If the board's in agreement with that. Any
So I
other
guess
comments?
I mean, just 90%, I guess, production byproducts, what would it be?
May I? So if you have a light industrial anything, making a widget, and in the course of making a widget, it has tooling, it has materials that are a byproduct of that process. So this is saying that when we review, we're looking at the adequacy of the proposed facility, that's part of the site plan review or special permit, and how they would handle and dispose of their refuse and other production or byproducts. We just looked at the compost site, and they talked about how they're gonna handle their products. So if we talk about construction, it's just a temporary measure that doesn't belong in this section. We're looking at the proposed thing that we're going to grant a special permit for or not, and how it handles its byproducts and refuse. So I think it's important to keep the intent is production of the thing that's being produced.
Byproducts, one word or two?
It should have a hyphen,
I think so too.
but I wouldn't, I mean, we can make a motion, but I call it a scrivener's.
Any other comments on that? Otherwise, we leave it as is, simply general feeling. Okay, anything else? Yeah.
So I went back and looked at the Attorney General's letter back to the bylaws that we voted in 2022 and I guess back to 2020, 2020. So anyway, one of the requirements, once we get these back from the AG, is that the town clerk per Mass General Law 440, Section 32, posts the bylaws. I don't think we've done that for the past 2 years, and you have to post them for, I think it's a 2-week period. So I think we have to get our ducks in order here.
Yeah, has that been done? I know, Betsy, I think that was something we talked about, you and I, at some point, about publishing the approved bylaws.
The town clerk religiously does that every time the AG submits a letter back. I will double check with her, I will get something in writing, but there's no question in my mind that she has posted it. So her ducks are in a row.
Yeah, if we could just get verification of that, because I've checked the papers for the last while and I have not seen them.
The paper, it doesn't go in the paper.
So the mass law says that you either post it in a, you either have to post it, publish in a town bulletin or pamphlet, copies of which are posted at least 5 places in town, or it's delivered to everybody. So I don't know where the 5 places have been published. If we could get
I
a
will
list.
double check with her, but I'm 99.9% sure she posts everything.
Yeah, so if we could just get the copies of her postings and where, that would be great. Just so we know that we're at least up to speed, so we can now do the error correction.
Anything else? So I'd like to take a motion to continue the public hearing to 7:45 on June 12th.
So moved.
Seconded.
Second.
All those in favor? Now, the reason it's 7:45 is we have 2 public hearings ahead of that, so, I'll, we have the, compost, and, geez, what's the other one now? Betsy, can you help me what the other public hearing is? I wrote it.
Too late.
It's getting late.
Rules and regs.
Rules and regs. Also, just for the board's information, Steve Carhart of the Downtown Improvement Committee made a presentation to the Board of Selectmen last night. And he's also contacted me, and he'd like to give us the same presentation. So I told him either our last meeting in June or our first meeting in July. So they'll be coming in to present on what they're planning on in the downtown, which I heard was pretty nice from what I heard. Okay.
Yeah, if we could maybe on Monday get an update on that, because I know he said he'd been in constant contact with the planning board, and
Yeah, I've been attending the meetings.
Chris is our liaison, and Betsy, I believe, attends those meetings.
So, but that's not constant contact with the planning board. The planning board isn't getting the information, so I know they submitted for a grant for wayfinding, and I know he kept saying it was part of the planning board, and so I would just like to be more in the loop than I am.
It wasn't part of the planning, but I think he meant the planner. That was,
He said the chair of the planning board and the town planner. So I just like to know what has been going on, because it made it seem as if that committee's been involved with the planning board, and I just don't know anything going on.
The planner, I think Betsy's been going to those meetings. Betsy, correct? You've been attending the downtown meeting?
I've been attending the Downtown Improvement Committee meetings. They ended up getting a grant to do placemaking with a company called Civic Space Collaborative. And Civic Space Collaborative did a presentation to the planning board 2 months ago maybe. And they are finishing up their report. They will be coming in probably, they may just be submitting the report because it's due the end of this month. So the only time we'd be able to put them on the agenda is the second meeting in June or third meeting in June. In the meantime, I have been working with Sue Croft on grants for, it's called the One Stop Grant. And we've been working on an infrastructure grant for for the other side of 128, bringing water and sewer upgrades, and also trying to get some money for the MBTA zoning task force. And it turns out that the Department of Housing and Community Development, who has recently changed their name to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities has, they have stated that information that went out in a webinar was wrong, and that actually towns could apply for more than 2 grants. And originally Sue Croft was told we could only apply for 2 grants. So we applied for the infrastructure grant and $60,000 to help with some technical issues with the MBTA zoning stuff. And it turns out that we were told the wrong information. We ended up getting a grant put together for wayfinding and signage, which is one of the recommendations of the Civic Space Collaborative's report, which is pending.
Okay, it's pretty detailed. Rebecca?
Becky Jake, Select Board. If I could just offer a little bit of clarification on the placemaking and wayfinding, that does go back to during COVID, when we had a joint grant for Essex and Manchester, and that was used with some of the local recovery funds that were offered. So that this goes back to that.
Okay.
And what Downtown Improvement is also showing, the presentation they would show you all, which is really pretty nice, is phase 2 of the Downtown Improvement.
Okay.
I greatly appreciate seeing a lot of what they're proposing.
Great, we look forward to that. Just for an aside, just for information, the task force, I believe, is meeting Thursday. That's their first meeting, and it's
6:15.
so guys wanna tune in? Otherwise, I'll entertain a
So
motion.
Gail has her hand up.
I'm sorry, Gail?
I may have missed it, but you had a motion and a second, and I don't think you had a vote.
We
On
withdrew
continuing the public
motion.
hearing.
No,
To extend the
public hearing. We had a vote by hand, Gail.
Oh, well, I missed the hands. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Unanimous. And now I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded?
Second.
All in favor? Gail, we all are in favor to adjourn.
I see your hands.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
You know, there are
Thank you all.
postings at the post office